Afternoon all. I feel there's a slight burden of responsibility at the moment with regard to Max over. Okay, he came second, as mentioned, in the Zurich 1934 tournament. He beat Alexander Alekhine. One of his losses was a bit surprising. I think it was to the 66-year-old Emanuel Lasker. Now, Lasker was one of the longest lasting world champions, with his style mostly misunderstood by the contemporaries at the time. And with regards to evolution of style, actually, I did allude to Lasker almost, well, having a psychological approach. That was a kind of implication people had, that he adjusted his style of play to the strengths and weaknesses of opponents. But, you know, some of his ideas, like an early G4 against dragon setups, they're used today. So in many ways, he was ahead of his time. But more importantly, this has been emphasized by Kasparov in my great predecessors, is that Emanuel Lasker seemed to be one of the few world champions of the game to avoid what Kasparov has called calcification. Calcification is like turning into stone, you know, slowing down, not evolving. And what could be the secret of this eternal youth of a style of chess which keeps evolving? Now, purely by accident, I've been posting quotations to the Sicilian defence wall on Facebook, and I did find an interesting quotation by Emanuel Lasker, which might be the secret of eternal youth as far as chess style is concerned. And here it goes. This is the quotation. And remember, that this is the guy who had watched Alekhine turn over Capablanca and say we're witnessing a new era in chess, a kind of more dynamic style. He was the first witness to the change in style that we were witnessing, that dynamism had taken over from the apparent complacency of Capablanca's style. But what was compelling, okay, in this quotation is this idea of the importance of observation. Okay, here it goes. Lasker is quoted with this: "The most intelligent inspection of any number of fine paintings will not make the observer a painter, nor will listening to a number of operas make the hearer a musician, but good judges of music and painting may be formed. Chess differs from these. The intelligent perusal of fine games cannot fail to make the reader a better player and a better judge of the play of others." So that is the quotation. If Lasker sincerely believed in this, he was also one, you know, to quote about changes of style. He was observing other people's style. He observed the impact of Alekhine changing the game completely from Capablanca. Capablanca had years of being undefeated, yeah, but there was still a stylistic calcification in Capablanca, and in the other world champions before that, like Steinitz, they became kind of caricatures of themselves and unable to evolve their own style. But maybe, you know, this is the secret. You observe games, you take in games, and what do we have nowadays? We have huge game databases. We can observe hundreds of games a day from different tournaments. We can take in everything. If we're keen to observe, we can observe different ways of winning from different types of positions. We can play different openings. We can do what we want nowadays if we have the evidence and we study that evidence. We can be more versatile and universal. So maybe this is one of the secrets of keeping a stylistic evolution going and not calcifying, as Kasparov has mentioned, that a lot of world champions did calcify their style. Now here, 66-year-old Emanuel Lasker playing against Max over with black. Let's have a look at this game. Okay, so d4, and Lasker, you know, he plays d5. Okay, it's solid, it's classical. It looks solid and classical so far. e6, after knight c3, knight f6, bishop g5, we have knight bd7. So we've got the classic problem of the light square bishop. After e3, we're transposing into kind of Slav now, modern Slav. This looks modern and trendy by modern standards. This game, Zurich 1934, to reiterate. So knight f3, bishop e7. Now queen c2, which looks logical. Black's delaying bishop d3. Doesn't want to give this free tempo gainer, you know, for this bishop maybe to come to b7 and stuff like that. Black castles. And now a3, waiting again, not moving the bishop. Rook e8. Okay, it doesn't look too amazingly clever, Rook e8, but you know, maybe this square could be useful for a knight maneuver. Okay, Rook c1, and black doesn't wait any further now for this bishop to move. Okay, he does take on c4, giving white the free tempo. He's not keen on b5 here. He plays knight d5, so he's simplifying the position a bit. White's dark squares are slightly weakened, actually, as well as black's. If you look at this bishop exchange transaction, okay, you know, white's potentially, you know, weaker on these dark squares, and black is potentially weaker as well. So with the dark square bishops gone, let's bear that in mind. Knight e4. Okay, knight e4. The knight's actually heading to here. We see in modern games, you know, masters are putting both their knights on g6 and f6. So it seems kind of modern in some respects, this game. The knight goes to g3. You know, it's ready to pounce. You know, maybe this bishop can join the battery again. Maybe there's some soft spots to target in black's position here. But black strategically, you know, wants to get this bishop out. He plays c5. You know, maybe later, you know, or maybe just b6 and bishop b7. Maybe he wants to saddle white with the isolated queen's pawn. In fact, after castle cd, the isolated queen's pawn's avoided. And this is also sometimes a modern decision. You know, to play knight takes d4. Okay, it keeps the symmetrical pawn structure, which we know a lot of modern players in the World Championship match this year. You know, a lot of symmetrical pawn structures between Anna and Gelfand. Okay, so we've got a symmetrical pawn structure situation here, which can lead to a very tight game. Knight b6, bishop a2, which actually hints at something that black has got something very subtle here. That with his bishop, he can actually go here. Maybe bishop a4 is useful in the future. So I'm not sure about this being a slight inaccuracy or something. You might think this is not at all significant. What is the significance of this? Why have I mentioned this? Well, it is making use of the bad piece in the position, and if b3 is forced, then c3 is a bit weaker, and then any c-file activities may be celebrating c3. So it can, you know, this sort of subtle thing can lead to disasters later in chess. But for the moment, okay, rook b8, and white plays e4. White I guess is slightly better here. And move 17. Let's get an engine perspective, you know, on this position. I suspect white is slightly better. Black hasn't fully equalised yet. It's difficult to equalise with black anyway. So let's stop that. Okay. So rook d8, and now rook fd1, and then the bishop does go to d7. And again, as I say, it's got this useful square. And after e5, okay, the soft spots are being highlighted a bit more. If this knight's driven back, is this a soft spot? Can white go a bit crazy for a hack attack? Is one of the points of the bishop to reroute here for this battery against the soft spot? If g6 was broke, is that a big deal later on? The knight retreats. Okay, bishop b1, we have got the battery. We have got the threat of queen takes h7. A dark square weakness is having to be created. g6, 2 dark square weaknesses, at least 2. These are a bit weaker with g6, but on the other hand, you know, is this a bit of a loose pawn? With the knight not being on f3, also black's got a queen h4 resource. The bishop's still got access to a4, while this bishop is sort of biting granite on this diagonal. Okay, how can white possibly lose this position though? It looks pretty good so far. It looks pretty cohesive, white's position. Queen e4. Now we see this annoyance, this bishop a4. You know, from little things, big things can happen. Now, immediately, you know, also, we can see that the e5 has weakened, you know, white's control of d5. So a knight d5 is also going to be potentially annoying at some point. There's some annoying ingredients to throw at white in this position. The pin also, if the rook moved, you know, this is a slightly annoying pin. So actually b3, but that causes a bit of a rupture on the dark squares. The bishop just goes back for a moment to d7. And white's tempted to sort of question this knight. He plays a4 now. The a3 pawn is also immediately on pre, by the way. So if black plays for b4, then maybe, you know, there can be a lockdown on c4 later. You know, knight d5, b5 or something, and a lockdown on c4. So a4, okay, covers the pawn. Maybe a5 is going to be useful. Knight d5, And you look at black's dark square grip here. Without the dark square bishops on the board, this looks like a nice blockading knight. Tactically, you might think, is it a bit loose? Is there a knight f5 or something? Not yet. I wouldn't have thought so. G takes. So bishop d3 is played, rook bc8, and black, enjoys now a tactical threat. And these tactical threats don't come from, nowhere. It was provoked, as I say. This bishop a4 has provoked this clear weakness of c3, which is now quite annoying. White, places the bishop against that threat, knight c3, and now we see bishop c6. And does black's position now have issues that it used to have? Okay, let's get an evaluation position from a technical point of view here. Okay, we're still with an advantage for white here of 0.32 technically, apparently, but from a human point of view, what happens next is black is has no problem pieces after knight takes c, b takes. He has potentially this awkward backward pawn and semi-open file. Now rook d3, maybe white's getting a little bit overexcited about the prospect of some sort of king attack. If this rook really is going to shift along the third rank, it's going to lose some flexibility. And a slight weakness of that last move might be control of the d file. So if black can react to this crude aggression, relatively crude aggression, Max over isn't a hacker as such, but if black can double on the d file, this would be a good positional antidote. Okay, so knight b4, and now rook f3. It looks like a very committal move, going on that king side, not really attacking anything. Usually you need pawns to kind of soften and for the pieces to break through behind pawns. Here it looks like a piece attack without making use of pawns. But worse still, black has got this decent knight now on b4 on a juicy dark square, and is ready to double the rooks on the d file. Rook c7 is played, sneakily he's going to double up rooks like that. h4, and white's really committing now to try and create some soft spots around the black king. Rook cd7, and black is now getting a solid grip now on the d file. And I think white is worse actually here. We get an engine evaluation here, and I'll tell you where it went wrong. White's nearly worse, black's virtually equalised. I think this h4 is questionable. Even though I'm fond of hacking moves, attack moves myself, you see an evaluation shift going along. I think it's to do with possession of the d file. It's been compromised here. Central positional play. So h4 going for soft spots can be a big downside. Central positional play. Rook cd7. h5 now. Okay, is white keen to kind of undermine black's king safety and maybe use this f6 square later? You can imagine a knight jumping in like this. Queen g5, celebrating the dark square weaknesses of white's position. And note also that if white's expended energy like this and it captures here, black is still sharing that h file. Rook e1, rook d4. So the fruit of white's effort is also backfiring potentially on white, that direction on the h file later. So this happens hg, hg. So black can potentially make use of king g7 and imagine a rook being able to switch to h8 later. Just imagine that, because we have that change of pawn structure still virtually symmetrical, apart from this aspect here, because this pawn moved there. Otherwise, both sides can potentially use that dangerous h file. Queen e2 now, and it looks as though rook d2 is tempting, but you might think, hang on, rook d2 is ruled out here. Surely rook d2 is setting a trap. Max Uber's setting a trap because he wants actually knight e4, and then to celebrate this f6 soft spot of black's position. Maybe get a fawn pawn there, and then that would add to a lot of danger later. Actually, rook d2 here is possible, because if knight e4, rook takes e2, and then rook takes e1, okay. But now, surely, knight e4 is threatened, forking queen and rook. Actually, knight c2 is played, apparently ignoring that. Okay, and after knight e4, it looks as though, hold on a sec, what is going on here? Is black losing this? If he takes this pawn, isn't he just going to lose his queen, for example, to knight f6 check? You can't surely take on e5 in this position. Surely not. And if the queen moves, then there's some options for white. Well, I wonder if you can guess what was actually played in this position by Emanuel Lasker. If I give you 10 seconds here, what did the 66-year-old veteran, who was able to carefully observe other people's games and keep an open mind about his own style of chess, what do you think he played in this position? 10 seconds starting from now, or you might want to stop the video. Okay, he did play queen takes e5. He made it into kind of queen sacrifice. So we have knight f6 check. He takes here on f6. He's only got knight for queen at the moment. Now he's got a rook and knight for queen off the takes. Rook and knight for queen. And you might think, is that a big deal? Rook and knight for queen? What is this? If the rook moves off the first rank, then clearly rook d1 is unpleasant because that knight poking into e1. You can't play rook e2 because of rook d1 getting the material back. So the rook goes to c1. You think, well, okay, it's a rook and knight for queen, but now comes knight e4, and we get a hint of major piece coordination between rook and knight here. How does white actually defend this dark square pawn, this f2 pawn? What is he going to do? Is he going to play f3? Surely f3 might allow knight e3. This looks quite critical, because if knight e3, then rook g2, and these knights are just going to slaughter the white king. For example, knight e3, where does the queen move? Like this, it's going to get very, very unpleasant very, very quickly with the two knights and the rook. You can't play f3 here. How do you defend f2? Well, Max plays bishop e2. And then we see knight d4, another forcing move, because now, what do you do about e2 bishop? You have to move it away. Okay, bishop f3. So you're giving up f2 now, but you're relying on slight tactical looseness here, perhaps. Okay, but at least you're holding up g2. Okay, maybe that's one of the better moves in the position. Let's get an engine evaluation here to see, really, is black better? Bishop f3 is given one of the stronger moves by Houdini here. But still, a pawn up for black in theory. So what has happened here? Does this defy material count? Is it to do with king safety and piece coordination? Bishop f3, knight takes f2. We have an immediate idea maybe of knight takes f3 would loosen some squares, and if the queen wasn't there, then knight h3 might be possible. The queen, it doesn't want to wait around here, though. There might be some other threats which maybe are quite subtle, and we should investigate. White's move was queen c4. What if white did a nothing move here? What is actually the concrete threat going on here? Say a5. Look at this. King g7 is given a huge weight, because we have that resource, I guess, of rook h8, and the rather cruel resource emerges of knight takes f3, and maybe rook h1 winning the queen. For example, okay, let's just give another token move. Rook h8. Just to see the concrete threat. Well, rook h1 would be threatened. So queen f2. That would be forcing actually, because rook h1 mate. So queen f2. Just to get an idea of what's going on here. If black got back material like this, then it will be absolutely winning for black. Black's got enough extra pawns, etc. So king h8 basically is king g7 rather is a powerful move. So queen c4 is like not waiting around for a major disaster. But now we have a seemingly very clever move played here. Knight d3, taking time just to hit the rook. Okay. If he had gone with king g7, there might be some other issues creeping in this particular position. For example, queen c3 might be possible. I'm not entirely sure, but let's just go with the game continuation here. Knight d3 attacking the rook. the rook moves now to f1, and now we see knight e5 hitting the queen and the bishop. So the queen moves, and now Lasker takes that bishop. So even though it's like still rook and knight for queen, he's got a very good coordinated piece attack. He plays check now. The king goes here, which might not be the best. Check. And now rook goes to d4, hitting the queen. Queen goes to e7. And now we see the wrath of king g7. So this looks to be very, very dangerous all of a sudden for the white king. Queen c7. Now rook 8 d5, threatening also now check like this, or even just rook g5 would be useful, cutting off the king as well, not going for the immediate check, but instead restricting the king to suspend the threat of a more lethal check. So rook e1, and we see actually that method employed here. Rook g5, not content with a check but a restriction. So the next check is going to be more deadly. And in fact, in this position, knight d5 and rook h4 are threatened. Knight d5 would be with tempo, hitting the queen. The queen didn't want to wait around for that. It played queen takes c6. Okay, and it looks very, very dangerous. Rook d8 was played here, threatening simply to mate here with rook h8. And if well, it doesn't seem as though white's got a reasonable defence in this position, he actually resigned here. If he plays rook e2, I want to just take it. What does white actually do here to defend in this position? He can throw in a check, then e5, and then it gets very desperate. Check. He has to give up his queen to stave off the mate. It's a very desperate position. So actually, Max Over's defence, actually, I think he played a wrong move at some point here to make this much worse than it needed to be. We saw in this position Black's advantage was creeping up. Here apparently knight e2 was an inaccuracy. Rook d5 was even more accurate. But after this check, apparently, okay, in the game king h2 was played. King g2, does it really make much of a difference to the attack? Pardon me, king g2 in this position. There is the resource of rook f2, so it makes a big difference. But black would still technically be better. So white's demise was accelerated with a slightly inaccurate defensive move of king h2. Here, maybe white can survive a bit longer. No immediate slaughter with rook g5. The queen's covering that. The question is, does black advantage increase from here? I guess it can do, but it's more complex than the game continuation. If the knight ends up coming to f5, it's just basically more complex. The rooks can again go in for an assault like this, doubling rooks, and use that knight on f5. So the advantage of black is undoubtedly going to increase with best play. So king h2 accelerated, hastened to the end, getting into a much more simple mating net construction. Okay, but from the evolution of style, it's amazing how long-lasting Lasker's style was. And maybe one of the secrets that he was basically observing all the games around him, all the high-level games. He was making conclusions about how chess style itself was evolving, but also his own style was remaining flexible. And then, perhaps it isn't a shock horror when he's able to beat people like Max Over and Capablanca. When he's apparently past it, he's still able to crush the champions. He's a great observer of style himself, and perhaps way ahead of his time. Okay, let's look at this game. So, for his age, this was, and his rating for his age was apparently some metrics are saying he's stronger than Victor Korchnoi for the age of a 66-year-old. His playing strength was still very strong at this time in Zurich 1934 tournament. He wasn't in the top 3. I think he was ranked 5 at the end, but this is one of his fine wins in the tournament. So the damage started, I think, with white having some dark square issues, and then getting a kind of less flexibility of pieces going for this kind of hack attack, which was refuted kind of positionally with black seizing the trump card to the D file and then using a queen sacrifice to kind of celebrate white's kind of discoordinated pieces really, and queen's really struggling against rook and knight in this particular situation, and white's king safety coming into play. So it's a very dynamic elements being played out here that you'd see in modern dynamic attacking chess. Okay, so with white having to kind of resigns here. Okay, so I hope there's some touch on the evolution of style series itself, just by this idea that if we want to evolve our own styles, maybe we should take heed of Emanuel Lasker's quotation that the intelligent perusal of fine games cannot fail to make the reader a better player and a better judge of the play of others. Comments or questions on YouTube?